Vaughn.
Aye.
Mrs. Drumheller.
Aye.
Dr. Griesau.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Dice. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll open it up to public comments. This is your time to address council, if you would, please. Come on up. Please sign in and state your name, but not your address, but that you do live in Monroeville.
Good evening. My name is John Aiken, Monroeville resident. Mr. Mayor, members of council, Manager McKinney, Solicitor Dice, good evening to all of you again. Mr. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity to address you in council this evening. During the past several months, we have begun to see those responsible for the terrible violation of personal privacy and individual liberty held accountable. There have been several terminations which the press has linked to the privacy violations. The Pennsylvania Attorney General has done an investigation and has drawn conclusions similar to what we have seen in the paper from the Dickie McCamey investigation. There seems to be some consistency to the responsible parties. Several months ago, I addressed council and specifically asked about CREA, the Criminal History Records Information Act. Mr. Mayor, if you recall, you asked Fire Chief and then Council candidate Ron Harvey to respond to my allegations. If my memory is correct, he claimed that there were no violations. I guess the Attorney General's office sees it differently. I hope you, the minority of this current council, and the council-elect notice some of the choice words used by Mr. Cherba. He seemed to be implying that based on their investigation, there were significant violations of CREA, but there were no sanctions because of the cooperation and corrective actions taken by McKinney and Pasquarella. He went on to say that these corrective actions are, if these corrective actions are reversed, they would pursue more stringent criminal and civil actions. I also find it a bit interesting that the shadow counsel is making decisions in the newspaper. To the best of my knowledge, Mr. Mayor, our current council has not heard, as a body, the reasons for the termination of the former chief or the dismissed dispatchers. Mr. Duncan had asked some questions last month, but when someone suggested that council go into executive session, it never occurred. So this council, as a body, really does not know why any of the recent terminations have occurred. The shadow counsel could not be aware of any discussions because the executive session never occurred. And it would not have been there even if it had. Furthermore, they have not had any access to the Dickie McCamey report. So, Mr. Mayor, how can either council really know if the decisions made to terminate employees were righteous or not? It would seem to me that McKinney and Pasquarella have been doing the right thing. I heard one of your cronies suggest that there had been a knee-jerk reaction. I think McKinney and Pasquarella's actions have been cautious and prudent. They have let the process work its way through. And, Mr. Mayor, McKinney and Pasquarella have done this under tremendous and misguided public pressure. The knee-jerk reaction, Mr. Mayor, has been with the three council members-elect comments in the paper. They have made the case for reinstatement without seeing or hearing the facts or the evidence. The other thing that I find interesting is that while the current majority has been accused of micromanaging the manager and the chief, the opposite is actually true. The majority of council has let manager and chief slowly and deliberately work the process. See, Mr. Mayor, the process protects all of us. So, Mr. Mayor, we have a chief and a manager who have done the right thing to protect our citizens in our police department. They have done the right thing under tremendous public pressure. They have done the right thing in the face of death threats, and they have done the right thing after hearing threats made against their families. They have faced tremendous pressure. They have done the right thing, and you, the current minority, and the four newly elected members of council have made multiple statements that you want and will reverse their actions. Mr. Mayor, I want to make a promise to you. If you or the new council reverse the decisions that have been made to protect our community, you will be called out for it, and the Attorney General will know about those actions before your gavel comes down to close that meeting. Mr. Mayor, McKinney, Pascarella, Allison, Erb, Drumheller, and Ramsey have faced abuse, harassment, embarrassment, threats of bodily harm to themselves and their family members, threats to their employment and the employment of their family members. They have been ridiculed while sick. They have had their children called out and threatened, and yet they have stood firm. They have stood firm because they had taken an oath, and that oath was to protect the citizens. And for the last 10 months, that is exactly what they have done. Thank you.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I will open up the floor to any resident that would like to come up and address council. And again, if you have not signed in, please do so. State your name for the record, and obviously not your address, but that you do live in Monroeville.
Hi, everybody. My name's Betsy Desmond. I live in Monroeville. I have a question for Mr. Dice. On Thursday, an hour before this meeting, the citizens' meeting, on the link of the Post-Gazette newspaper was this letter. Who all got this letter before the meeting?
You don't have to ask Mr. Dice. You can ask me. It was myself, Mrs. McKinney, and Mr. Dice.
I want to know, as a resident, I'm not doing HIPAA, I'm not worrying about attorney stuff. I want to know, as a resident, who sent this to the Post-Gazette an hour before the meeting. It has Bruce's stamp on it in color. It's the letterhead, the gold seal. I want to know who did it. If there was only 3 people that had this letter, who did it? Mr. Dice?
I sent it to council.
All of council?
Yeah, I emailed it.
All of council, before the meeting?
I emailed it to them,
Before the meeting,
a day or so before the meeting.
okay? Well, you just got this November 7th.
Okay, whatever day, that same day I emailed it to Lynette, the mayor.
And what was the date of the citizens' night?
That
The
same day.
7th.
Yeah.
So the same day, somebody emailed this to the Post-Gazette, and it got on to the government, whatever, watchdog thing. When you print it out, it's in color, so it's an original, scanned-in original. I want to know.
I didn't do it, I can tell you that.
Well, just so you know, Bets,
No.
will you
Go ahead.
please let me, my letter's still upstairs unopened.
Okay,
So
where's
obviously-
yours?
Mine's up in my office. Actually, mine's right here. It's opened.
It's in, but it's
Mine doesn't
been
have
in
the
your
stamp on
office.
it. Yeah. It was the one I read from.
Okay. Clarence, where's yours?
Didn't get it.
You didn't get an email?
Council received it, Betsy, by email.
By
not
email.
personal.
Okay, so, well, somebody...
That would have been a black and white copy if they would have sent it.
Well, this
It's
is
a
a-
color copy.
It's a color.
It's a
This is
color.
from the original, because it's in color.
Yes.
So
I just
somebody,
scanned and sent that in, and
It's-
sent
Right.
it to everybody, whether it came out in
Right.
color on there.
so somebody on this council sent this to the Post-Gazette before the Citizens' Night. It was online from the Post-Gazette website.
Betsy, nobody will ever.
Well, you know
admit
what? Okay, we have attorney generals checking for HIPAA and all that. We as citizens now are saying, we'll bring the attorney general back in for the leaking out the information before we as citizens get to know this. I don't have a problem with that. You know, Mr. Yakum's making a promise. He's going to take everybody down with the attorney general. Well, back at you, Mr. Watchdog, and anybody that's putting stuff out before we, the citizens, know.
Well, I do have a question. No, I'll wait for my report before I,
You know, enough is enough. We're starting over. You know, I don't have a problem with anybody here. But I don't like the stuff leaking out, and he's saying that he's going to get the attorney general. So why? I know as many people as he does.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'll open up to the floor to anybody who would like to address council.
Hi, I'm Tina Mueller, a lifelong resident of Monroeville.
Did you sign in yet, Tina,
No,
please?
I didn't. Oh, while I'm signing in, what did happen with the death threat? That's being investigated, right?
I would assume it's still under investigation.
A couple of months. I know it's not CSI Miami or anything, but you would think that we would have some answer by now.
Again, I can't respond because I do not know. That's being very sincere.
I think someone should call. If it's the county investigating, they should get their butts in gear. Okay. I'm going to address you, Mr. Mayor. Congratulations on your recent win, first of all.
Thank you.
But I do want to address this. I want all the residents to hear this. I want the public to be able to hear what I have to say. I actually have a few questions to ask about these investigations that have been going on regarding these information violations, supposed information violations. But before I do, I kind of want to go over a timeline of what seems to have happened, and I guess correct me if any of these things are wrong. Back in late 2012, a report was made to the Federal Department of Health and Human Services claiming that there was a HIPAA violation, in that a former police chief and lifetime member of the Fire and EMS Department has obtained and shared information regarding an emergency incident. Keep in mind, the person that received that information already had complete read access to the system that contained all that information. So the person who received the information already had access to it. Immediately, an internal investigation occurred, and that was immediate. And it was determined by our solicitor that there was not a HIPAA violation. When the Health and Human Services Division called the person who made the report, he then changed what he wanted to say in the report, added things to the report, including that the fire department members could access inappropriate information. That's what he said. This information was shared with Health and Human Services and the press before it was shared with at least several members of council. This, by the way, is in violation of the computer usage policy that all municipal employees must follow. The Health and Human Services Department wrote a letter indicating that they want Monroeville to perform an investigation and change their practices if necessary. A second internal investigation was done at that point using a different law firm, which I guess was Dickey McCain. They released a report to Health and Human Services, I think it was a couple months ago now, but it has not been made public, although apparently the press had a copy. The Health and Human Services Department has not officially responded to this report yet. So as far as it's concerned, the matter has not been resolved, and it is unknown if violations have occurred, if they feel violations have occurred. Then, in April 2013, the Pittsburgh District Attorney's Office received complaints about then Police Chief Douglas Cole. By July 2013, the district attorney released a letter indicating that the cases were closed because the DA's office found no basis in the charges against him. Then, in October 2003, the Pennsylvania State Police was notified that there might be violations of their NCIC clean system. For those who don't know, this connection to the Pennsylvania State Police from us allows the Monroeville Police Department to run driver's licenses and criminal background checks, things like that. We have an agreement with them. If we violate it, of course, we'll lose that ability. But somebody reported us to the Pennsylvania State Police, and so now they're investigating us. I'm not sure if everybody's aware of that one. This person did talk to me, and they were still investigating. The investigation is still outstanding, and they haven't said whether or not they feel any violations have occurred. Now, in November 2003, we now see a letter.
13.
2013, I'm sorry.
Okay.
We see that there's a letter from the Attorney General. It's quoted in the newspaper. From what had been indicated in that letter, the attorneys general had a very strongly worded that violations had occurred. However, it appears as if the attorney general's office had not spoken to a lot of the people that some of the other investigators had spoken to. it is this letter, this very strongly worded letter that was put out here, is being used by the present political majority to justify their rash decision to fire the former police chief, Doug Cole, and several other employees. So my question to you is, was the Attorney General ever here?
That's one of the questions I will ask the manager.
Okay, I want to know whether they were here, if they performed any investigation, who they talked to, and if not, where do they get off writing this strongly worded letter that there were violations when they don't appear to have done an investigation at all?
Well, apparently, my understanding is Mrs. Drumheller sent a letter to the Attorney General.
Right, so she said there's violations, but they didn't investigate it to see if there were violations? They just wrote this letter?
I can't answer that.
Okay, well, I think it's very irresponsible of them to write a letter without doing an investigation. They can't just claim there's violations just because somebody told them there were.
Well, if you recall, I do want to make a correction on that. There were violations, and if you remember, Mr. Harvey brought it up 5 different times to Pascarella that some of that stuff was bleeding over into the fire department, the police calls. And
Now, wait.
this happened but that happened way before any of this stuff happened. He testified it up here.
Harvey said that firemen they thought they were able to access things, but no official investigation by any government agency, besides our little local law firm, has said that there were any actual HIPAA violations.
That is correct.
Okay. So this letter that gets put in the paper and the whole world, and people keep using it to say, ooh, we had violations, see, we were right in justifying and firing people. No outside agency has determined that there were violations at this time.
Again, as you remember, Tina, what I said last week on Thursday, that there will be a lot more information coming out because things are not complete yet, especially from HHS. So I agree with you on that. I think that, a lot more information will come out.
Okay. I just want everybody to notice that it appears as if someone or some group of people have been notifying every government agency they can think of to try to find that we've had violations. We've got the PA State Police, we've got the Attorney General's office, we've got the District Attorney's office, Health and Human Services. It appears as if they're just finding every single agency they can to try to report and see if they can get their actions justified. I just want to make sure that's known. I also want people to know that there have been several occurrences of municipal employees breaking the computer policy, and only one was ever fired, and he was rehired right away. So just so you know, this is not a normal circumstance that people get fired for things. And just one more thing. I just want to remind the public something about the software through which the fire department accessed all municipal information. Everybody in the paper, all the letters keep blaming former Police Chief Doug Cole for all the violations. But there was a single individual, and it was not Doug Cole, who was the project manager for this software. A single user who had complete and super user access to this software. And he was the only employee communicating with the software company at this time. He was also working part-time for that software company. Doug Cole was not speaking to that company. He did not have user privileges. The whole software package was assigned to this other individual. So if you're going to fire Doug Cole because you're claiming he was responsible for it, then I think you're wrong. 2, I think you need to also fire the other person.
You're talking about Pascarella because he's the administrator.
I was trying to leave names out of it.
No,
I'm
I
just
won't
trying
do
to make
that.
sure
No,
everybody.
since they're willing to put Doug's name out, I'm willing to speak up.
Okay, that's all I have to say.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I will open it up for anybody who would like to address council. And Beth, as you sign in,
Sign.
and state your name, and obviously you live in Monroeville, I just wanted to say to our listening public, as well as everybody sitting here, I apologize that this keeps coming up. Being in the minority, we have no control over what goes out to the media. Hopefully, I know I'm as sick of it as you are about hearing it, and I'm tired of all the allegations flying around. I just wish that everybody would sit tight and wait until everything comes in so it can be viewed and put out appropriately, again, and if it's possible. And I didn't mean to steal some of your issue there, Beth, but go ahead. Please state your name
Beth
and...
Fishman, I'm a resident of Monroeville, and no, I'm not going to sit tight, and if I have to beat a dead horse every month, I will be up here beating that dead horse.
It is your time.
Mr. Aiken apparently reads quite a bit into this Attorney General letter, and based on what Ms. Mueller just said, there's a lot to be read into this, and this is not the first time I've asked. Has anybody investigated Chief Pasquarella and his involvement into that computer system and the access to the records?
I cannot answer that honestly.
Mr. Aiken stood here one night and stated that people observed or got information regarding a minor. How did he get access to that information when no one knew the supposed charges involved a minor?
Again, that's one of the issues we've had up in council for the 6 years I've been here. Information leaks out all the time.
This letter also states that the Attorney General found an investigation or a specific incident where police records were tampered with, altered, removed, or destroyed, although it did not establish the responsible individuals. How did that occur?
My understanding, that was cleared up.
Was the Attorney General or a representative here to review that situation?
That's one of my questions I will ask the manager at my report.
One final thing, the Government Watch page also published a screenshot of what the police or what unauthorized individuals were supposedly looking at. Does anyone even care that on that screenshot that they published, there was an address with a domestic violence call? He's up here throwing stones left and right while he's published on the internet the address of an individual in Monroeville that called the police for domestic violence. Call it what it is.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I will open it up for public comment. This is your time to address council. Seeing none, we'll close this portion of the meeting and we'll go over the reports of the officials. And Bruce, anything more for us?
Oh, not enough.
Lynette, you have 2 items before you.
Yes, item number 1, Mr. Mayor, is council permission to place a streetlight on Burt Drive at pool number 122129.
We did discuss this last week. Motion on the floor.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further questions or comments? Roll call, Sharon, please.
Dr. Griesau?
Aye.
Mrs. Drumheller?
Aye.
Mr. John?
Aye.
Mrs. Allison?
Aye.
Mr. Duncan?
Aye.
Mr. Ramsey?
Aye.
Mrs. McKinney.
Item number 2 is